We left off last video discussing our plan for our user info view controller, right? How we're going to create all these puzzle pieces of child view controllers to create this one screen. Well, in this video, we're going to start with the first piece of that puzzle, and that is our header view controller, right? With the avatar, the name, the location, the bio, all that stuff. That's what we're going to build in this video. Before we dive into that, you may be asking yourself, like, why are we using, child view controllers? In this particular case, wouldn't just a UI view be fine? And you'd be right. And to be completely honest with you, this is a bit of a contrived example. There were certain topics I wanted to hit in this course because after all, this is an educational project, and child view controllers was one of them. But let's talk about some of the advantages of using view controllers rather than UI views. First up, you get access to all the view lifecycle methods, right? View did load, view will appear, view will disappear. So if your UI is very dynamic and views are coming in and out, that can be very helpful. And also view controllers are very self-contained, right? Not only can they present the UI, but they can also have the logic to drive the UI in and of itself. And then also, a view controller can be pushed onto a navigation controller, in a stack. So you do get flexibilities. And again, be very, very clear. In this particular app, we don't need those benefits. I'm trying to just tell you why you would use them. Again, this is a bit of a contrived example because I wanted to demonstrate using child view controllers. Here's an example of when I used one in real life, just to kind of bring the lesson home here. Here in the Luna app, we have this chart that is pulled up on a slide up card on the bottom of the home screen. This chart can do, 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, and show different data. It's a pretty complex view, right? So this is a child view controller because it's also being reused on a different screen, a patient's history screen that shows more details about the measurements. So in this case, that is a child view controller. So you can see how it's being reused. And because it's a pretty complex view, right? It's got the segmented control switching the views. It's actually got a network call pulling in the measurements, right? That made sense to be a child view controller. And it's nice and compartmentalized, and it's reusable throughout the app, as you can see. So hopefully you understand a little bit more about when to use child view controllers versus just the UI view. And again, this example is a bit contrived, but it is an educational project, and I do want to showcase how to use child view controllers. So with that out of the way, let's move on to creating our header view controller. Over in our custom views folder here, we have our view controllers folder. I don't think anything's in there yet. Oh, the alert view controller is in there yet. So new file, or you can do Command N, Cocoa Touch class, hit next. And we're going to call this the GF UserInfoHeaderVC. It is a UI view controller. And create. And get rid of the comments here. Clean this up. So before we start coding, let's pull up the design and let's break down what we need here. You can see we have the avatar in the kind of the upper left. And then to the right of the avatar, we have 3 labels, right? We have the login, the actual user's real name, if they have it, and then the location. Now, if you remember back to our model, the location and the name are optional. So our user may not have that. So we'll have to handle that. And then down below, we have a label that holds the bio. So looking at this, our bio is going to be our body text label. That makes sense. Our login is going to be our title label. But you see under the login, right, the name and the location, that's not quite a body and it's not quite as bold as a title. It's kind of like this middle label. So we're going to create a new label called a secondary title label. And this is very common kind of font weights throughout apps, right? You're going to have your big bold titles, and then you're going to have your body for your text. But then there's always usually a need for a secondary title label, right? Not something as bold as a title, but not as small as a body. So that's what we're going to create for our app. So we see how we're going to create this view and then lay it all out, but we're going to need to create that secondary title label first. So let's go do that. So here in our labels folder, let's open that up, do new file, Command N, Cocoa Touch class, next. This is going to be a UI label now, a subclass of a UI label. It's called GF secondary title label. And we're going to talk about this real quick before we build it here once I get it up here. And this is because these are going to be similar, right? And matter of fact, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the body and we're going to copy, again, kind of the advantage here. Be very, very careful. And then paste into the secondary title label. I want to talk about how we're going to use some similar code here, right? This may not be the most dry. And this is the constant balance you have to walk, but let's talk about it. I like the fact that we have a specific title label, secondary title, body. Throughout the app, those are very logical of what they do. Of course, we could have taken the approach where we had one label and we made that label super flexible, right? Where we passed in a size, we passed in a font weight, maybe some dynamic type stuff, right? You could make one generic label that was flexible enough to handle this. That is one approach, that is fine. However, what I want to talk about is I think there's a balance of making things more easy to use and obvious. Like, right, again, we're going to have a title label, secondary title, body, and we use those three labels throughout our whole app. And it's easy to change a certain type of label rather than if you had one label that was flexible to do everything. So again, it's a constant balance between making things flexible, generic, reusable versus very straightforward, very simple to use, right? And that's a constant balance back and forth. So I have chosen to create very explicit title labels, even though they may be similar, because I feel that's easier to use throughout the app. And I went through that whole discussion because, like I said, there's going to be very similar code with some slight tweaks. So the first change we're going to do is in our custom initializer. We're not going to pass in a text alignment. Text alignment's always going to be left, but we want to pass in a size, CG float. And then here, instead of text alignment, right, we're going to set our font. Font equals UI font.system font of size, and we're going to pass in the size there. And actually, you know what? Let's do this again, right? We want font size, right? Because could be confused with the size of the label, not the actual size of the font, so be specific there. And then here's the major difference, right? Our secondary titles are medium. Remember our body was of weight, body, well, we're using dynamic type there. So we can get rid of the font down here. And we do want to do, well, text align is left by default, so we don't need to type that in. Our color is going to be a secondary label, that's fine. Adjust fonts, size to fit width, that is going to be true. We wanted our body to allow it to shrink a lot, 0.75. Similar to our title, we only want this to shrink to 0.9, so that is a bit of a difference. We are not going to word wrap because this is a title label. Title labels are generally one line, so we want to do the truncating tail, so ... if we need to. And then we're doing the tamic here, translate auto resizing mask equals false. So with that, we now have our secondary title label that we'll use here on the design for the name and location. And again, just to reiterate, I do know this is very similar to some other labels, but I like being very explicit with having a title label, secondary title, and a body. So now that we have our secondary title label, let's go back to our header view controller, UserInfoHeaderVC. Now we're going to start listing off all the UI elements we need, and we're going to lay it out within the view controller. So I like to do things kind of top to bottom, left to right. So the first thing we're going to need is the avatar image view. Let avatar image view, all right, tab these over a bit, equal GF avatar image view, right? Initialize with a frame of .0. And then pulling up the design, now you can see we have the three labels, right? We have the username label, the name label, and the location. So let username label equals, this is a GF title label, right? This is going to be align left, right? And then font size is 34. Again, I've dialed that in, I've figured that out. And then below it, we have a name label. So let name label equal GF secondary title label, the one we just created. And we want to pass in a font size of 18. Again, I've dialed that in, I've figured that out. Now, before we create our location label, let's pull up the design. Let's look at this, right? We have the location SF symbol right there, and then the word location. Well, that's not all one label. Actually, that's an image view, and then like a little square image view, and then to the right of that is the label that has the location. So we're going to need a let location image view, and that's just a regular UI image view. Initialize that. And we're going to need a let location label equal, and this is a GF secondary title label, again, with a font size of 18, just like up above. And then the last thing we need on the design is the bio label. So let bio label equal GF, this is a body label, and we're going to do that with text alignment dot left, right? Because it's not text align center. So these are the UI elements we need. Again, we went through the design, we've initialized all these. So what we need to do now is add all these subviews to the view and then constrain them. And then we need to configure the UI with the user object. Now we don't have a user object right now. Well, let's get that. So do var user, whoops, and that is of type user. And we're going to create a custom initializer. So when we initialize this view controller, we can pass in a user, set that user, and then whatever user we pass in, we're going to set the avatar. We're going to set the username. We're going to set everything based on that user. So let's create that init. Here we have init, and we want to pass in a user, which is of type user. And we have to call the super.init, super.init with the nib name bundle, nil. And then we need to set self.user equals user. So now when we initialize our GF user info header VC, well, we need the required storyboard init. That's what we call it there. So now when we initialize a GF user info header VC, we can pass in a user, and then we're setting that user to it. And then in a future function, we're going to set all this stuff equal to like user.name, user.login, that kind of stuff. Now, the way I organize my functions in this view controller is going to be a little bit different. I realize, one could argue that's inconsistent throughout the project. I get it. You absolutely want to stay consistent with whichever style you choose. However, educational content, I want to show you different styles so you can pick and choose which you like the best, right? I want to expose you to different ways of laying things out. Very minor differences, by the way, but I just want to point out like why I might not be being consistent when consistency is something you want to do in your code bases, for sure. So the first function I'm going to create down here is going to be one called add subviews, because we have a lot of them. So func add subviews. And just going to basically add all these on 13 through 18. So view.add subview avatar image view, view.add subview user name label, view.add subview name label. Another thing you could do, which I'm going to do in a future view controller, is you could throw all these views into an array, and then now you can just do a for loop through the array to add these subviews. View.add subview location image view, view.add subview location label, view.add subview bio label. And then here in view to load, we got to make sure we call it add subviews, plural, put an S on the end there. Again, like I said, just doing things different ways to expose you to different ways of doing things. If you don't like it, do it the way we're doing it, do it your own way. This is just organizational, kind of subjective stuff. The next function we're going to create is called layout UI, which is going to be all the constraints, which as you see we have quite a bit of objects here, right? So going to be a lot of constraints. Remember, all throughout the course, I said we're going to get a lot of practice laying out views programmatically. Here's a good example of it. So function layout UI. Let's make sure we call this, because I'm going to be typing a lot, so I may forget it. So make sure we do that. And I know we're going to need two variables a lot. So again, let padding, and it's a CG float, equal 20. And then let text image padding, again, CG float, equal 12. And what padding is the left and right side of the screen, which you'll see. And then the text image padding is, the avatar image. I'll show up the design here. The labels on to the right of the avatar image, right? The name, the location, all that stuff. That is going to have 12 from the image. We're going to pin it there. And again, with these constraints, you can pin these in a numerous amount of ways, but we're going to be doing it this way. And then before we start the constraints, the last thing I need to do is location image view dot tamic, right? Equals false. And then now we can start laying out the constraints here. So ns layout constraint dot activate. And this is going to be more of the same of what we've done, except we're going to be doing a lot of constraints again for all these objects here. So looking at the design, we're going to base almost everything on this avatar image view, right? The avatar image view is going to be placed in the upper left, and then we're going to be pinning each label to the avatar image view, kind of like at the top of it, the middle of it, and the bottom of it, make those spaced out nicely. And we're going to put the bio label beneath that. That is the general gist of the layout of this header view controller. Now, one could argue these labels here to the right of the avatar image view. One could argue you could throw those in a stack view. Sure, that's fine. I'm choosing to do it this way. I think both ways are fine. The benefit of the stack view, right, is that like no matter what screen size, they're going to space out equally. Well, we're not really making this view like dynamic based on screen size, so we're not really like benefiting much from the stack view. But again, that is one way you could do it. I chose not to do it that way. Now, like I said, everything's going to be based on this avatar image view in the top left. So let's get that pinned first. Avatar image view dot top anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to this. It's going to be view dot top anchor, and it's going to be padding. So 20. So we're going to be 20 from the top of the view. And the view is in this view controller, but this child view controller is going to fill whatever container we create. We're going to create the container for this view controller on the UserInfoVC later on. So we want that to be 20 from the top of this view controller. And we're going to, leading is going to be also 20 from the left of the screen. So avatar image view dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to that. Yep, view dot leading anchor. And again, padding. Got to make sure we get some commas in here. I always forget those commas. And then now that we have it pinned to the top and the left, now we need the height and the width. And we want our avatar image view to always be a square, right? So we're going to actually hard code this. So avatar image view dot width anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to 90. And again, I dialed in 90 to figure this out. Avatar image view dot height anchor dot constraint equals 90. So again, we have our avatar image view in the upper left. So we're going to base everything off of that is good to go. So the next item we want to do is our username label, which again is that kind of aligned at the top of the avatar image view and a little bit to the right of it. So let's do that. Username label dot top anchor. Now here's going to be, I don't think we've done a constraint like this before. So we're going to do equal to, but with no constant. So this is going to be equal to the avatar image view dot top anchor. So what we're doing here is we're lining up the top of our label, our username label, to the top of the avatar image view, right? So the tops are going to be aligned. That's what we wanted. And then now username label dot leading anchor. So we want to pin this to the right side of the avatar image view, again, with our text image padding that we've created up here. So username label dot leading anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to avatar image view dot trailing anchor, right? Because this is the right side of the avatar image view. And then the constant is going to be text image padding. And let me scroll up here. My head's probably blocking that. And then now the username label dot trailing anchor dot constraint equal to, now we want to pin this to the view trailing anchor, because we do want this to go all the way to the right side of the view. View, no matter what width the phone is, we want this to go all the way over. So view dot trailing anchor, and then the constant is going to be negative padding. Remember on the trailing, we use negative. The padding is the 20 that we've been using. And then now we need a height for our username label. So username label dot height anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to 38. And again, that's just something I've dialed in. And how I came up with 38 was, if you look, our font size of our username label here is 34. And if you remember back, we have like the letter Y, J, G. Remember the letters that go lower? So that's why you got to make your label a little bigger so you don't cut those off. So cool, we have our username label. Now let's keep going down the list. We have our name label. And this is going to be very similar to the username label. Name label dot center Y anchor, because we're going to line up the center of the label to the dot constraint. Is going to be equal to the avatar image view dot center Y. So again, we're using the avatar image view as our anchor, if you will, to line up this UI. Now the tricky thing here is the label here. You'll see I had to dial this in. I had to put a constant of 8 because if I just left it with no constant, it was like a little too. It wasn't exactly center visually. Like, the label was lined up, but the way the text was lined up in the label didn't quite look right. So I had to tweak that to a constant of 8. And maybe I'll come back once we're running this and showing it. I'll show you what it looked like with a constant of 0, so you can see how I had to tweak that. But now same thing here. Name label dot leading anchor dot constraint is equal to avatar image view dot trailing anchor, like we did before. And then the constant is text image padding. Now, again, there's numerous ways to line this up. I could have done name label dot leading anchor is equal to the username label leading anchor to just line all those up, or you could just make it the same constant, however you choose. It's going to accomplish the same thing. And then name label dot trailing anchor dot constraint is equal to view dot trailing anchor. And the constant is negative padding, just like we did up there with the username label. Again, or you could have set this labels width equal to the username label width. That would work too, missing commas. Like I said, many different ways to do this. Do it however you like that works. And then now we need a height. Name label.height, anchor.constraint equal to 20. And again, same concept here of why I picked 38, because the font size is 18. So I make it a little bigger to accommodate the, again, the Y's, the G's, and the J's, all that stuff. So now that we have the name label, now let's do the location label. But the location label is a little bit tricky, right? Because we have to put the UI image view to the left of the avatar and then pin the label to that UI image view. So it's a little bit of a two-step process here. So let's do that. So location image view dot, now we do bottom anchor dot constraint is equal to avatar image view dot bottom anchor, because we want to line up the bottoms again of these to make everything look nice. And now we're going to do the leading, same thing with the text image padding. So location image view dot leading anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to avatar image view dot trailing anchor, and then the constant is going to be text image padding. Again, that's why we set the constants up here, right? So we didn't have to constantly keep typing out the number. And if we ever want to change those numbers, just change it here in one spot and everything will line up if you want to tweak your UI a bit. So now location image view, now we need height and width, because this is going to be a square, because it's just a quick SF symbol. Width anchor dot constant equals 20. And again, 20 is the number that I just dialed in. Location image view dot height anchor dot constraint 20. So now we have our location image view pinned to the right side of our avatar image view. Now we need to pin the location label to the right side of our location image view, like the little pin thing. So let's do that. So location label dot center Y, because we want to center this right with the location image view that we just constrained, dot constraint equal to the location image view dot center Y anchor. And we actually don't need the constant. We're just going to keep that as 0, comma. And then now we need to pin it to the right of the label, right, of the image. So location label dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to location image view dot trailing anchor, and the constant here is 5. Again, I just dialed that in. Text image padding of 12. Push the label too far over to the right and there's too much space there. It looked weird. I just dialed in 5. And now we need to pin this to the right of the view, right? We want the location label to extend all the way to the right side of the phone screen. So location label dot trailing anchor dot constraint equal to view dot trailing anchor. And this is negative padding. So again, this is the same thing we did for the username label and the name label. And then now we just need the height of 20, just like our name label. So location label dot height anchor dot constant constraint is equal to 20. So now we have this little section here on the design with the avatar image view, our username, our name, our location, little pin, SF symbol that we're going to use, and then the name of the location. We have all that set up. Now we're just missing the bio label underneath. So let's do that. So we do bio label dot top anchor. So we're going to pin this to the bottom of the avatar image view. Top anchor dot constraint is equal to the avatar image view dot bottom anchor, and the constant is going to be text image padding. So we want the same padding that we have up on our username here for this. And then now the leading anchor, we want it to line up perfectly with the avatar. So bio label dot leading anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to the avatar image view dot leading anchor. So we're going to make sure those two line up nicely. And then now we need the trailing anchor, which again is going to go all the way to the right side of the screen, just like our username and all that stuff. So bio label dot trailing anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to view dot trailing anchor, and constant is negative padding, just like we've been using. And then the final constraint is the height. We're going to hard code this bio label dot height anchor dot constraint equals 60. And here's why I chose 60, because we only want our bio label to only be 3 lines long. because the GitHub bio does have a limit of characters. And when I did the design, I figured that at our height for the body, or our body label, our body label also can shrink a lot. So 60 will give us a good 3 lines of readable text. And, because we don't want this bio label to be super dynamic and stretched so far. So that is our layout. That is a lot of constraints. Remember how I said we're going to get a lot of practice at it? Hopefully you followed along with that, because we've done a bunch of constraints before. We added a new kind of constraint where we're just, lining it up, the anchors with each other, like lining up the top of one item with the top of another. Other than that, these are pretty straightforward. Hopefully by now you're starting to pick it up and you're starting to get it. So we've added our subviews, we've laid out our UI. Now the last thing we need to do is actually configure all this stuff based on the user we get. And because this is kind of where like the meat of the logic is, I like to put this up at the top. So func configure UI elements. And then here's where we're actually going to set all this stuff here, right? So let's just start from the top of our UI here. Like we're just going to use this as the list here, right? So avatar image view.download image from user.avatar URL, right? Because we have our user object, right, in our custom initializer. We're creating that there. And so we have that. And now the next thing we need is the username label. So username label.text equals user.login, right? And now we need name label. Now remember, name label is optional, right? Our user might not have entered their real name. So we're going to use nil coalescing here to give it a default value. Text, I'm going to tab these over, equals user.name. Now see, name is optional, as you see here. So if we do the double question marks, we can get some nil coalescing. So basically what this says is if user.name is nil, use this default value. I'm going to keep this blank just for the UI. I like a clean UI. You could do, no name. You could do NA, not available. You could type out not available. Whatever you want to put in for your placeholder, sure. I'm going to keep it a blank string. And then the same thing with our location label. We're going to handle the SF symbol here in a second. .text equals user.location. Again, it isn't optional, so I'm going to leave it blank. Again, if you want to write no location, that's fine. I'm going to leave this blank. Actually, you know what? I am going to do no location, because we're always going to have that pin there. So if the pin with a blank, that kind of looks weird. But if there's a pin and it says no location, we're going to keep that. And then the bio label .text is going to be equal user.bio. And that could be nil as well. So we'll just leave that blank, or no bio available. Again, you can choose. I'm going to leave the name blank, no location, no bio available. We'll put that in there for now, but you could leave it blank. You could type in something else. And then remember, we need to set the number of lines for the bio label. Bio label.number of lines. Dang it. I thought I had these lined up nice. Again, the trials and tribulations of lining up your equal signs, I totally get if you don't want to do it. But like I said, I'm going to do it. Is going to be 3. So we have everything set up except for the SF symbol in our location image view. So we have to do a little bit of work here to set this up. So let's do location image view dot image equals, and SF symbols, if you remember, let's pull up our SF symbols app here, and you'll see, well, this is all of them, but if you type in pin or map, oh yeah, this is one we're going to use. We're using this one here in the upper right, map and ellipsis. But you see this string, like you have to type in this string exactly. So mapin.and.ellipsis. So you'll see here. So in order to get that, you would do equals UI image, and then it's a system name here. So system name, and then you would type in that string, right? And mapin.and.location, I believe it was. Maybe let's double check that. Probably wrong. Ellipsis. Okay. ELLIPSE. ELLIPSE. Easy for typos, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in a constant. So we haven't created our constants file yet. This will be part of more optimization. But let's do that right now because we're going to be using more SF symbols. So in your utilities folder, do Command N for new file, Swift file, name it constants, hit create. And then here we're going to have an enum called SF symbols, and static, let call this location is going to equal, and let's go back to our header info VC, copy paste this. And we're gonna be building out this constants file more in the future, as well as this SF symbols enum. But for now, this will be our first one. And so now in our UserInfoHeaderVC, instead of this string, we can type SF symbols dot location. And like I said, we're gonna have more SF symbols that we use in future videos, so that will get fleshed out more. But now when you use SF symbols, it'd be very, very easy, rather than worrying about typing that string exactly as is. Now these SF symbols are like blue by default, so you have to change the tint color of your image view. So location, image view dot tint color, these dang equal signs, equals dot secondary label, right? Because that's the same color as our secondary title label. So we want it to be the same color there. So hold Option, drag up, tab once. It's not that bad, right? Anyway, so now make sure we call configure UI elements, configure UI elements. So that is going to call this. We're going to set all of our stuff based on the user that we initialize our view controller with. We, adding all the subviews, we're laying out all the constraints. So that will fill whatever container view we create for this child view controller in with this view that we just set. So now in our UserInfoVC, we need to create that container view and then add our child view controller to that container view. So over in our UserInfoVC, let's create this called, say, let header view is going to equal a UI view. And we're going to have more. There's going to be all the elements, the cards that we saw in the design. We're going to have those container views. So our UserInfoVC is going to be those 3 container views laid out like we mentioned in the planning video. And then those 3 container views are going to be populated with the view controllers that we create. So real quick on this UserInfoVC, it's going to be a mess for the next couple of videos because right now we're building each individual item piece by piece and then putting all those pieces together into this UserInfoVC. So while we're creating those pieces, this is going to be a mess. Remember, sawdust in the wood shop. We are going to come back in a later video and clean up this view controller, refactor it, make it look nice and pretty. It's going to be a mess in the time being though. So anyway, here's the header view. Let's create a function called layout UI. Func layout UI. And so view.add subview, we want to add the header view that we just created up there. And now we need to create the constraints for this header view to lay it out. And as you see in the design, we want this header view to be at the top. So ns layout constraint.activate. More constraint fun. This is the kind of the good and the bad with the programmatic UI. A lot of typing of constraints. So we have header view dot top anchor dot constraint equal to, now we're going to do view dot safe area layout guide. This is how you deal with the safe area with the notch, because we are at the top of the screen for this header view, so we do have to worry about the safe area, right? We don't want to pin it right up to the notch, got to deal with that. Dot top anchor, and actually we don't need a constant because we're going to have it pinned right up there, because in our view controller, remember we pinned the avatar 20 from the top. We kind of handled that in there. You can either handle that here in the UserInfoVC or in the header child VC. We handled it there. And so now we need the leading and trailing. Header view dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to that. So view dot leading anchor 20. Header view dot trailing anchor dot constraint. Again, same thing. View dot trailing anchor -20. And then the height is going to be 180. And again, this is a height I've dialed in, I've hard coded. Height anchor dot constraint equals 180. So let's do something real quick to make sure we have this looking like we want it. Header view dot background color equals dot system pink. It's been our debug color. Let's make sure we call layout UI in view to load, our crazy view to load that we will fix. Layout, well, it's actually, that shouldn't be the first thing. We'll just call it down here. Again, crazy view to load we got going on here. So let's run this and see if we get our pink header view like we want it. So SALLEN 0400, get followers, tap on a user. Oh boy, I know what I did. I forgot to hit done. Usually when you get all these crazy things, like these are all just conflicting constraints. So you will notice what I forgot to do. And it's something that I said, you're gonna forget to do it. What did I forget to do with the header image view or header view? Header view.tamic, right? Translates auto whatever equals false. Trust me, you will do that many a times. And again, we're going to refactor all of our container views in a later video. You're going to see how we're going to put them in a for loop and do all this stuff there. But again, this UserInfoVC is going to be messy for the time being. 0400, get followers, hit that. Okay, cool. Okay, I thought that was printing out an error, but we're still printing out our user. That's what this is. So cool. We have this is our container view for our header image VC. So cool, we have what we want, right? This is our container view for our header info VC, right? So that header info VC that we put in there is gonna fit right into this pink square that you see here. And actually, I just noticed something that we can optimize. Remember how we pinned it to the very top because we're handling the top padding in the actual header VC? Well, we can do the same thing with the edges here. So basically what that means is instead of doing -20 here, we can just pin it all the way to the edge. Because if you remember, we're doing the -20 in the user header info VC. So if we run that again, that should go all the way out to the edges. Hit get followers. Cool. And then, yeah, we're going to fill it in there. And then, like I said, we'll handle the padding actually in that header info VC. So now we have to actually add our child view controller to this container view. So to do that, we'll create a function to add child VC. So func add child VC, and that is a UI view controller. And then to container view, because we're gonna be adding multiple child view controllers to specific container views. So we want to make this flexible enough so we can just pass in whatever child VC we want to add to whatever container view. Container view is going to be a UI view. And here we have an add child, right? And we need to pass in a view controller. So that is going to be the child VC that we pass through. And then we need to add our child VC's view to the container view as a subview. So container view dot add subview, and this is child VC dot view. So our container view is going to be our header view that we set up here, that pink view that we set. And let's do this before we forget. We don't want it to be the background to be pink anymore because we're going to be filling it with our actual view controller here. And then we want our view controller to fill up the whole container view. So we do child vc.view.frame equals container view.bounds. And then the last line to make this all happen is child vc.did move to, and then the parent is going to be self. All right, it's going to be this view controller, our user info VC. So when we call this, we're going to add a child VC to a container view. And how we want to do that is once we have our successful user, like right here, we're just printing it. Now we want to actually do self.add child view controller. We want to, we're going to initialize the header VC. So GF header or user info header VC. Give us an initializer, right? We have the custom initializer that takes in a user that we created. We're going to pass in this user here that we're getting back in our success case. So user, and then the view we want to add it to is header view, right? Our pink view that we created. It's no longer pink. We fixed that. Actually, we got to use self there. Self.headerView. So again, how this reads, we're going to get our user. Once we get the user, we're going to add that and do all that. So now we're doing a lot of UI stuff here, right? We're adding child VCs to the view and all that stuff. So we got to get to the main queue here. Dispatch queue.main.async and throw this on the main queue once we get our successful user. So make sure we're calling layout UI here. Actually, let's call layout UI above the network call just in case something weird happens. Again, we're gonna, you know what, I might do it here. This video is already super long. I may do it in the next video. Just clean up this view to load a little bit because I don't want it to get too confusing. But we want to make sure we call out layout UI before we make the network call. So anyway, that's what's going to happen. Make the network call. We're going to add our child user info VC. Everything should populate. This is the moment of truth. We did a lot of coding without really running it. Fingers crossed, see what we got here. SALEN 0400, get followers. Let's go down to Jason here. And there, yep, we have our header view looking good here. Dev J. Mitchell, we have his name, Arizona, there's his bio, and avatar, everything's looking quite good. Let's try somebody else just to see. Yep, good. We can click on a bunch of other people, click on Caleb. There we go. So as you can see, our header child view controller is running, looking good. The next thing we're going to do is add our container views for the other cards, like the GitHub section and the followers section. And we got to create those view controllers in a few steps. There's going to be a process to create those reusable view controllers as well. But now you see some child view controllers. We talked about why you would use them. Again, this was a bit of a contrived example. A UI view would be fine, but I wanted to showcase how to use these. But anyway, yeah, we got our header up and running. On to the next one.